Good little children, lay down your heads. Good little children, pray in your beds. The Krampus comes to hunt tonight, his cloven hooves on snow so white. The kind and gentle turn him way, but naughty ones won't see the day.
Let's talk about Krampus. I can hear people in the comments now, like, nope, not a never, not in my games. And I get where they're coming from. Like, if you want to play Krampus, you're essentially going to be a demigod CR21 creature. And that, as a party member, is kind of going to destroy everything you throw at.
A better way to think of this might be as a race of Krampus demons, or possibly used as a template for a Krampus warlock or a worshipper. Whether you're wanting to play as Krampus or just use him as a big bad for your Christmas one-shots, you're going to need to level him down unless you're playing a level 20 campaign. I'd recommend throwing out all the level DCs and just roll your own stats and then use his abilities at face value, but just adjust the stats down so that they match your party or level. Playing as Krampus could be really, really fun, and you're just going to have to take into account that Krampus is very powerful, and he's not really supposed to be able to be killed very easily. So while this may seem a little overpowered from the get-go, I do think that it will balance itself out in how you play the character, as well as how you incorporate it into the campaign.
First off with the stats. This is going to have to be something more like an evil Santa, or I don't know if you're working for Santa or doing Santa a favor, so he doesn't have to give away so many toys.
Stats are pretty easy here. You're just going to go strength and charisma. I assume you're not taking the level 20 stats right out of the book, because that probably would break the game, but you could make it work. From there, you're just going to reverse engineer all of the DCs based on 8 plus your charisma modifier. Some of them might have strength, especially if you're doing the grapple checks. But when you're dealing with things like a fear aura or the Bayful polymorph, those are all going to be charisma based, and those should get the bonuses from any class or features that you decide to take. Otherwise, they're just racial feats. Go for the stat and your proficiency modifier. Beyond that, you are going to get a lot of really cool abilities, and you have to balance that out with how you play the character, just like a paladin would. So if you really want to simplify things, I would just pick the Krampus race that we're building and then be a paladin or a warlock for complete simplicity. You can really go with whatever you want, but you're going to have to follow that like paladin code of conduct. But if you are able to keep up with this code of the Order of Birch Branches, Pact of the Golden Rods, Wicked Celebrants, Cold Punishers, Anti-Santa Paladins, then I have no problem giving you damage resistances and immunities that any Krampus should have. Those damage resistances include
bludgeoning, piercing, slashing, any non-magical attack.
Because you are a seasonal immortal fae, you do get immunities to fear, cold, and charmed effects.
And in Pathfinder, they refer to this as limited immortality. And I know what you're thinking. How's that balanced? Well, Krampus has a weird set of rules to follow. You can't just outright kill someone who hasn't been naughty. And even if they are, you're working for Santa. You're supposed to be punishing these people for being naughty and giving them an opportunity to correct their behavior. Even though you have ungodlike powers, you have to be in control of them. Otherwise, you're just a villain. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. So this is a great opportunity to have someone in your party essentially be a hyper paladin. Oh my god, is Krampus just a Santa paladin? Do you think maybe he started as like a tiny little elf? Is Krampus just a super beefed up elf? Because that would be amazing. He's like a gremlin who eats Santa's cookies, or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Grinch, or the Hulk, but for tiny little elves. That's amazing. I like it. Okay, let's start over. The Krampus is one of the few demons that wholly exists inside of the material plane, which means if you kill him, he will come back and to the material plane, which is really cool. Limited immortality gives you immunity to ability damage, ability drain, aging, cold, death effects, disease, energy drain, fear effects. It should be very hard for you to take damage or die, like horror monster levels of plot armor. The downside to this is that if you do die, you have to wait until the winter season of the following year to revive yourself, or wait for someone to finish their test of the golden rod. We'll get to that more later. You are going to be damn near invincible, which I assume Santa has the same kind of thing going for them, but well, no one wants to test that out. I mean, if Santa sends Krampus after you for being naughty, what's he gonna do if you actually like attack him? Don't attack Santa. And that's kind of why I think it's okay giving this to a low-level character. You're basically gonna need good aligned weapons if you even want to have a chance of hurting this bad boy. So if you do want to play with one, you're gonna have to take that into account. This is a great opportunity to play a boss-level monster as a party member. You're gonna be overpowered, and that should be built right into the campaign. In D&D, the rules are a little bit different. You're basically gonna get advantage on anything that's not radiant damage, and your damage resistance applies to that as well.
So now that you have this nigh invulnerability, what are you gonna do with it?
Whips and chains. It's a bad title for this chapter, but fuck it. Krampus's Krampi or Krampuses, I'm not sure which one of those is correct, basically come with a full arsenal of natural weapons. You get a D10 bite, you get a D4 claw, you get a D6 horn attack, and then of course you get your D8 magical plus 3 chain attacks with a grapple. I might have buried the lead there a little bit. This is the main focus of your build. Your magical chains are regular chains if not possessed by you. But when they are, the chains act simply like a paladin weapon would, granting magical properties, evil alignment, as well as your choice of a disarm trip and a free grapple. And this is the first part of the stipulations for your character.
Following the code of Santa by punishing evil people with your evil acts of violence, and to make them less evil next year.
Yes. You have all these magical chains because you're not really supposed to be running around murdering people like a barbarian with an axe. You are supposed to be messing with people, scaring them into being good. So for that reason, your character is built around the manipulation of people in combat through these combat maneuvers. Did I mention that this works at ranged? D&D says it's like 20 feet. Pathfinder 2e says it's 60. You find a good medium there. If it doesn't work out, just throw them in your bag. It only takes an action so long as you have a creature grappled.
It's literally the whole point of being Krampus.
That's it. Attack, grapple, into the sack. End of turn. Krampus is terrifying, but that's what you're going to be doing every single turn. And let's talk about the sack. Depending on the regional lore, it's either a sack or a basket, and has two different variations, which both can be applicable for this character. 1, full of wonderful treasures and wonders, and 2, full of nightmares and terror. The sack to anyone but Krampus is just a sack, meant to entice naughty villains to attempt to find it or steal from it with no real reward. While it's in the possession of Krampus, people can attempt to steal items from it, but there's a very good chance you will end up pulling out a cursed pin, which will essentially just destroy the next year of your life. More on that in a minute. If you get thrown into the bag, you basically have one opportunity to free yourself before the regression starts. And I quote, "Each round a creature begins its turn stuffed into a Krampus's bag. It must succeed a DC 32 Fortitude save or be regressed back to its childhood. The creature is affected in size as if by reduced person, but none of the target's gear changes in size. The effects persist for 24 hours, after which the target regains its original size. This is a curse effect."
The save DC is charisma based.
Basically what that means is if you fail the save, you immediately turn into a child for the next 24 hours, bearing a remove curse spell or wish spell. And with that, you are a small-sized creature with normal-sized gear. I hope you're not using any heavy two-handed weapons or wearing full plate mail, because
Yeah, that's not going to go well for you.
I really do think this is the end goal for the Krampus players. You're not trying to physically defeat your enemies, but you're trying to make them afraid, make them feel helpless. Terrorizing your enemies is a win in the eyes of these quasi-immortal beings. So it might not matter how immortal you are, because all you're really trying to do is terrorize the people you're going after. And in most situations, you turn somebody into a kid, they're probably not going to want to fight you anymore. There are a few other caveats about the bag being replaced or repaired with an action, and that items and people are essentially weightless for the Krampus, which could be used to your benefit or detriment, depending on how your DM and you decide to use it. That and it's the 1-2 punch for the coup de grace for the Krampus, which is called punishing the naughty. Krampus can use his bonus action to designate a single target he sees as being naughty. The target creature must be a child or young creature or the victim of Krampus's regression ability. Against the target, Krampus has advantage on attack rolls and wisdom ability checks, and on hit with weapon attacks, deals an additional 1d8 damage of the same type of the attack. These bonuses remain in effect until the target is dead or Krampus designates another target as the being naughty. For Pathfinder, you have to use this action to designate who you're saying is naughty. You get a +2 to basically everything as long as you're targeting that player. You can only do it to one person at a time, but yeah, that's still a really good buff. Like, you need them. You're already super powered. Which leads finally to the Test of the Golden Rods, which is straight out of the Pathfinder 2nd edition, Lost Omens Monsters of Myth book. And I quote, "Krampus offers golden rod mementos to imperfect mortals. With effort, the recipient might change their behaviors and outlooks with the memento, but more often, the trinket transforms into a terrible burden for the creature, eventually leading to confrontations with Krampus himself and the final punishment. When granting a golden rod memento, Krampus can add or remove tenants as he pleases." This is a really fun curse, and you can slip this to your players without them knowing that it's directly from Krampus. And this is a fun way to introduce Krampus as a monster or as a warlock patron. And I just now realized that we've been doing a lot of curses and demons lately, which is kind of weird. I don't know what that's about. This coin-sized golden pin depicts a bundle of 5 trimmed tree branches. Once you've stolen the pin, accepted it from Krampus willingly, or carried it for at least 1 minute, the curse activates. After that happens, the pin fastens itself to your clothing,
providing you with immediate feedback of why you've been naughty and gives your location and any wrongdoings directly to Krampus.
The pin reappears and reattaches itself within moments of being discarded or destroyed. The pin constantly monitors your actions, judging you against Good Aligned Champion's code of conduct, plus the following tenets.
You must never knowingly steal or cause harm to somebody with the intent of stealing their possessions. This does, however, mean you can still loot bodies as long as you are defending yourself. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to try to wiggle their way out of that, but that's between you, your DM, and Krampus.
Which is kind of the same if like paladins can loot bodies. So I think that makes sense. Whenever you violate this code of conduct, at least one of the golden branches tarnishes, more depending on the severity. During the winter following the curse activation, the pin transforms based on the number of golden branches remaining. If you have 5 golden branches remaining, you're just forgiven for being naughty and you get a reward of gold. If there's 3 to 4 branches remaining,
you're forgiven your transgressions and the pin turns into a non-magical item worth about 10 gold.
With 1 to 2 branches, the pin transforms into a leering Krampus face and grants you weakness 5.
For 5th edition, I would just say it gives you weakness to bludgeoning it. And because this is a curse, it's permanent until you remove it with a remove curse or a wish spell. And finally, if there are no branches remaining, then Krampus is immediately summoned to an adjacent square of the player,
thus starting the final boss battle of whatever one-shot you're running. Pretty great.
And if you're playing as a Krampus, you want to be giving these coins out one way or the other, whether tricking people into stealing them or just handing them out to villainous folks, because this is how you revive yourself. You can't be revived through normal means. You have to wait until someone completes the trial of the golden rods, or Santa resummons you with his magical warlock patron powers. Plus, if one of your players tries to end combat by just handing out all these gold coins, it's going to break the rogue in your party. The only other thing to add is your frightening presence and some limited spell casting, which can be very flavorful as a monster, but as a player, I would just have that be based on whatever class you're playing at the time. Things like Baleful Polymorph as well as frightening presence work really well, thematically.
Groupies. These title cards are not getting better.
Something to remember is that you are an infamous character. You're not only going to run into people who are terrified of you, but you're going to run into people who worship you.
And while those people might want to imitate Krampus, they might also bring a level of unhealthy fandom. The book suggests that some of these people are seeking the blessings of Krampus, which isn't wholly stated, so there could be a lot of a fun point of contention for you in the DM. So you're basically looking at 3 options.
Allowing one player to be Krampus in all of his glory.
The way that Krampus would be foreseen as one of the bad guys, but make a campaign around it. That can be really fun. Option 2 involves playing as Krampus's up-and-coming demons, who people may or may not believe you have any relation to.
This would work really well for like a Krampus patron, warlock, or paladin.
Which can be a lot of fun too. Or option 3, dealing with celebrants or sycophant weirdos who are just way too obsessed with Krampus and constantly want to steal your sack. Phrasing.
This works really well regardless of if you are Krampus or just Krampus adjacent, because then you have competition as well as like unhealthy attention from people that aren't always villains.
And that's really going to define how your campaign works. I think playing super high-level archetypes like Cthulhu or Santa or Chuck Norris in D&D seems like a hard ask, but if you let the lore of the character define their path, not just their stats and their ridiculous limited immortality, the path your party takes can be a lot of fun. Just because you have unlimited godlike powers doesn't mean that you want to use them all the time, should use them all the time, or is convenient to use them. Maybe Santa makes a deal with you that you have to help this party of low-level adventurers accomplish their goal. Maybe you're keeping a watchful eye on one particularly naughty adventuring party to deal out punishment after the goal is achieved.
Maybe Krampus needs help from an inspiring adventuring group to rescue his magical blink dog, Max, after he'd been kidnapped by a bunch of rogue villagers after being punished by the horrible Krampus.
And you have a party of do-gooders that's going to help you get them back. Just remember that if you're playing Krampus because he's powerful, you're not really fitting into the spirit of the character. But if you want to be a demon-faced bully dealing out some jolly old justice, bust out the eggnog and have a grand old time. Thanks for watching, everybody. Keep your dice on the table. A great thanks to all the Patreon members for helping us keep the lights on. You've all been amazing this year, and I'll make sure Rugby puts in a good word to the big man for you. I'll try to make sure he spells your name right. You know, I never did figure out what was up with Krampus's tongue. Maybe Eric Larson did a redesign. That, or maybe all of Santa's elves have Gene Simmons tongue. Gene Simmons?
Not J.K. Simmons. That's Buff Santa. The other one.
Blah, 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 blah.